Yeah, it's completely mixed, but the problem is that all of the songs are very long because I made them specifically as album tracks. And in order to pick out a key cut, as they say, for radio, they would need to be shortened a little bit. So I've been fooling around with edits of various kinds. It's also, I mean, twice the work basically to do a video of a song that's 6 minutes long than it is a song of 3 minutes long. Not quite twice the work, but I mean close, given all the editing time and so on.
Yeah. So you're in that stage now.
Yeah, just trying to shorten things down a bit, condense them. But there again, I don't want to diffuse any of the power of the songs as they stand on the album, and they've got to remain intriguing enough to make people want the album rather than just listening to it on the radio.
Are you happy with it?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely happy with it. It's crazy because I mean, the night that I finished it, I finished mixing it about 4:30 in the morning, and I caught a plane to Greece at 7 in the morning, and I didn't take a copy with me. And I went out there and I was with lots of friends, and they kept sort of saying, "So how did the album go? You know, what are the songs called and everything?" And I said, "I don't want to talk about it." And I didn't listen to it till I got back.
Yeah.
And by that time, all of the impressions of people around me who had heard the album had accumulated as well. And that kind of feedback is very valuable because obviously you get very involved. I mean, 3.5 months work, you know, obviously I was fairly deeply entrenched in what was going on in the album, and it was useful from the point of view of objectivity to keep it at arm's length by listening to it through other people's ears. I mean, I'll only stick it on now when there are other people in the room because then I hear it the way they hear it. I don't listen to it on my own.
Well, the first time you did listen to it, after being away from it that long,
yeah,
did it hit you right? Did you go, good?
Yeah, I did, because it was also the first time that I'd heard the songs in sequence, you know. I'd heard them isolated before. I'd never heard them one after the other, and it was very refreshing.
So you're happy?
I'm happy.
So at this point, whether it sells or not, I mean, that helps, but at least you accomplished what you set out to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, it's often... when you hear an artist say, "Oh, I really want to sell a lot of copies of this record," or "I really want it to go high in the charts," it's often misinterpreted, and very often what they mean is they want it to reach a large number of people, you know. It's an easy thing to be cynical about. I mean, of course you want to, you know, have an exotic lifestyle and that sort of thing as well, but the most important thing for me now, because I do believe in the album, is for it to get across to a lot of people. But not at the expense of the music.
So are you ready now to go back through the windmill circuit of People magazine and sitting on the days at industry conclaves and things like that?
Well, it's easy when you have the conviction about the record. That's the thing. I mean, I've done promotion before for records that I didn't fully believe in, you know, and that's a bit of a bluff, really. Frankly, but this will be a lot easier this time because I feel there's me in the album, and also it's a real challenge because you know, because I'm being told that there's not an obvious single and things like that. It's a real challenge to sort of say, well, look, I mean, I made it initially through a new channel, if you like, which was the visual presentation, you know, by yourselves and others, and it's a real challenge for me now to sort of say, well, I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it more so, you know, and not give in to the pressures to go out and do it the old way, which is, you know, endless touring and as much media coverage as possible and those kind of things.
Right. Well, when you finished the golden age of wireless, was it obvious that you were going to go with She Blinded Me with Science? Was that?
Well, no, because that actually came quite a long time after the album. See, when the album originally came out, it didn't include that song. And it was only afterwards that I recorded that song, and it started to do well. So then it got included on the album, and the album did well as well. But no, I mean it was when I recorded that song. Obviously, we'd over here we'd released a couple of singles off the album, which had done reasonably well. But everybody felt that this was a good shot as a single. It's possible the same thing will happen with this album. I don't really know. All I know is that the album as it stands is really exactly the way I want it, and I'm not going to compromise that in order to make it fit in with the plans of any marketing department.
Right. Great. Any
Just a little bit on your background. What were you doing before you were Thomas Dolby? You said that you'd been doing some producing and playing with other bands. Who were you involved with?
Well, people like Lena Lovitch and John Armatrading and the Thompson Twins and Foreigner even, and just a wide variety of different people. I've always found it very stimulating to go off and work with people whose style of music is different from mine, and I still do. I mean, I take kind of vacations, I suppose, from my own music every now and then, and get involved in something else, you know. And now it tends to be more soundtrack, bits and pieces of soundtracks, than working on records for other people. But I do that from time to time. You know, I produced a girl from New York City fairly recently, Adele Berthet, which is like a dance 12-inch. She's doing very well in the clubs there at the moment. And every now and then I find somebody interesting, you know, who I'd like to help out or contribute to what they're doing. But I mean, I don't think I'd produce a band or anything like that. It's not really up my street. And maybe as well, I'll start directing promos for other people. More and more of the offers that I get nowadays are you know, include video projects as well. I used to get sent tapes by bands who wanted to be produced, and they'd say, well, we think this is a single. And nowadays I get bands who send a tape and say, well, this is the single, and the promo video will be like this, you know. Because I think a lot of the kids coming through nowadays have got far more specific visual ideas, which is understandable, really. Because their heroes are the ones on the screen, not the ones coming out of the speakers, you know.
Which was I think a change that was not anticipated in its magnitude by the biz. You know, they still, you know, the very term promo.
Yeah.
To me, it's the vehicle now, because
Yeah.
I've talked to too many 15-year-old kids, and that's where they are.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's just come full circle, really. I mean, the beginning of the 60s, TV was all important, you know. I mean, if you look at anybody who did massive things in the States, like, you know, Elvis or the Beatles or whatever, you could always plot out the landmarks in their rise to fame with, you know, Ed Sullivan shows or whatever, that kind of thing. And I think we just went through a phase, you know, at the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s where the musician was far less in the public eye. He was the guy at the back of the stage with a pair of jeans and a pair of shades and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, you know, sort of playing amazing guitar breaks and stuff like that. And then, like in the middle of the 70s, with the artists who were more involved in visuals as well, like, you know, Bowie and Ferry and people like that. It suddenly came back full circle again, and artists were people who could control all of the different media to get their music across.
Which is kind of interesting. Well, a lot of bands still, you know, here's your director, do your video, but
Yeah.
people who understand it have to be in control because the people in the industry aren't as familiar and as readily able to communicate in that fashion. Sure.
Well, I think that's happening more and more, but I mean, it's just like, obviously, you know, I write my own songs and I arrange them, but I also choose to produce them because I have enough knowledge of the technical side of things. I can apply my mind simultaneously to the technicalities involved in recording as I can to the musical side, whereas a lot of people prefer to just stick with the music and leave all of that stuff to somebody else. And the same thing applies really in video, you know. I mean, I've done an amount of amateur filmmaking and so on before I ever got into the music business, so I had a basic knowledge of it, and it was easy for me to apply my mind to it once I started making promos. It's just personal choice, really. I mean, most of my friends who are in bands will have a very big say nowadays in the ideas behind their promos, but they won't stick around for the editing and they won't look through the camera lens and those kind of things, you know. Which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think it's heading towards people directing themselves, same way as it's become more common for people to produce themselves.
Sure. I mean, I've seen interviews with major stars. I don't know when I'm going to the studio, they tell me to stand here and I do this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
That's you. You know, I mean, that's your image. That's you.
Well, I
they're
mean, you know,
performing with. And
there are people like that who are performers. You know, they're just addicted to performance, and when the atmosphere is right, they will just perform. You know, a good friend of mine, Steve Barron,
Limelight.
from Limelight, who did the Billie Jean video for Michael Jackson. They got halfway through the day apparently, and Michael suddenly said, "I want to dance," and from there on, it was just no problem. You know, because suddenly he just clicked into it, and he wasn't up till then. He hadn't been that involved in the planning of it, or the location, or the crew, or anything like that. Switched it on. Great video. It's to artists.
There's one question for me. If you can possibly put into one word what rock and roll means to you, what would that word be?
What means to something explain? Oh, rock and roll. Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah. What rock and roll means to me? Well, you see, it means something very different on this side of the Atlantic, I think, than it does from your side, because I wouldn't consider myself, you know, a rock and roll artist at all. I don't know what kind of label I put on myself, really. But, no, I mean, rock and roll to me is, you know, stadiums and dry ice and, you know, that kind of thing. But there again, you know, I suppose the Clash are rock and roll, really, and you know, they're kind of my generation in a way. It's difficult. It's difficult.
Well, Paul Simonon said, "If that's rock and roll, I don't want it." So
is that what he said?
Yeah. So who knows?
Was he talking about Mick Jones by any chance? No, not that Mick Jones. That Mick Jones.